We all know perfectly well the boxers who have earned the most in history, and these names do not surprise us at all. In fact, the strange thing is that almost none of them, except for Floyd and his semi-professional fights with Koreans, are actively competing athletes at the moment. So it turns out that boxers don't earn much in our time, and we shouldn't expect new faces in the Forbes list from the world of boxing, right? Wrong. Friends, today's video will be dedicated to the top 10 boxers who earned the highest fees in 2022-2023. Please don't forget to like and leave a 4-word comment, and also subscribe to never miss new videos. And we're starting. Here we go. Number 10. Deontay Wilder, $20 million for one fight. Top heavyweights have never been shortchanged when it comes to money. For the excitement and wild adrenaline that these guys provide with their fights, you can pay any amount. And who else but the knockout king Deontay Wilder deserves substantial payouts. If you delve a little deeper into the history of the Bronze Bomber, you can understand that he has been on impressive payments for a long time, starting after winning the WBC title. The most powerful puncher in history has been at the top of the heavyweight earnings for a long time, and for the first fight against Tyson Fury, Deontay took home the most money. For the draw in that legendary battle, the American pocketed a cool $20 million, and for his defeats, he was consistently rewarded with no less. From 2022 to the present, Wilder has only fought once against the most successful Finnish boxer in history, Robert Helenius, and the 3 short minutes the guy spent in the ring turned out to be the most memorable. The Northern Nightmare took a short but deadly blow and flew into a terrifying knockout, for which Wilder could immediately be awarded victory in the same category. The Bronze Bomber was rewarded a little differently, but no less pleasantly, and he left the Brooklyn Arena with 20 shiny new millions. There are talks of a fight between Wilder and Anthony Joshua in Saudi Arabia arranged by the Sheiks, and this fight could become one of the highest grossing in recent times. Considering how much both boxers received individually, I'm even afraid to imagine how shocking the figures in their contracts will be this time. If the match does take place and Deontay Wilder comes out as the winner, I'm sure he will earn more than ever before in his life and comfortably secure a place in the top 5 in the next such ranking. Number 9. George Kambosos Jr., $23.3 million for 3 fights. One of the most unexpected characters in this ranking, isn't it? In reality, there's nothing strange about it. Even one title significantly changes a boxer's income, and when there are a whopping 4 of them, there's no need to say more. Until the chance of his lifetime, George was not a well-paid boxer, partly because he didn't have a large fan base. However, the young man fought dynamically and skillfully, and his victories continued to build up an impressive streak. With a record of 19-0, the Australian got the opportunity to fight with the recent executioner of Vasily Lomachenko, Teofimo Lopez, and surprisingly defeated him by split decision. Everyone was shocked by this outcome, and George and his team were delighted because big money awaited them ahead. The figures in the champion's contract changed slightly. A significant extra digit was added. With the new terms, the ferocious fighter went to fight for the undisputed champion status against Haney and was mercilessly beaten. The only consolation for Kambosos was the $12 million that went into his account. He prepared vigorously for the rematch, even putting a bed in the gym and not leaving it, but the result remained the same and he lost again, this time receiving slightly less, $10.8 million. As soon as the recent discussions about George settled down, the extra zero in his contract disappeared as if it were morning fog, and for the fight against Max Hughes, the former champion took only $500,000, which still didn't prevent him from becoming one of the wealthiest boxers of the last year and a half. Number 8. Devin Haney, $29.5 million for 3 fights. And here is the new undisputed champion in the lightweight division. Of course, a person with such a status simply had to make it into this selection. Even for his fight with Venezuelan golden boy Jorge Linares, Haney earned $3 million, and that was in 2021. Exactly a year later, the Dream faced off against Australian George Kambosos Jr., who had recently defeated Teofimo Lopez. Winning the fight decisively, Haney became the new undisputed champion, and according to official data, his earnings amounted to $4.5 million. According to information from reliable sources, the boxer's payouts from pay-per-view were split in a 70-30 ratio in favor of the Australian. So even with a one-sided defeat, George earned significantly more. Everything changed drastically in the rematch. This time, the Dream was in the A-side promotion, and with that, the figures in his contract took on a different form. After 12 rounds, Haney once again secured a decisive victory, this time taking home a whopping $20 million, including half of the proceeds from the pay-per-view percentage. After adding such a substantial amount to his bank account, the 24-year-old fighter accepted a bout with the toughest opponent of his career, Vasily Lomachenko. In a grueling battle that lasted all possible 36 minutes, DAVIN was declared the winner by a disputed decision, and his reward was a rather modest $5 million, which however proved to be enough to surpass his former opponent and secure the 8th spot in the list. Number 7. Gennady Golovkin, $32 million for 2 fights. Gennady Golovkin, known as Triple G, has a somewhat melancholic success story. At a time when he had an incredible record of 37-0 and was knocking out multiple opponents each year, nobody noticed him. However, when Adelaide Bird scored her legendary 118-110 in the first Golovkin vs Canelo fight, the world finally opened its eyes and saw how great a boxer Gennady truly was. Unfortunately, by that time, it was too late. Shortly afterward, the Kazakh lost the rematch to Seoul and gradually began to decline. But his earnings, on the other hand, started to reach unprecedented levels. For his 2 fights with the main Mexican star in the ring to this day, Golovkin earned no less than $20 million in total, which was more than his cumulative income for the previous 10 fights. Afterward, Golovkin signed a lucrative contract with DAZN, which also brought him quite a few $1 million, but we are only interested in his recent earnings. In 2022, Gennady participated in a unification bout for the status of a double champion against the Olympic boxing champion from Japan, Ryota Murata. For a beautiful knockout in the 9th round, Golovkin took home a whopping $12 million. The fight took place in 2022, and in 2023, for the first time in his career, Triple G moved up to the super middleweight division and had his 3rd and final bout against Alvarez. In the end, the veteran lost in the ring, but certainly not in terms of money. After 12 intense rounds of fighting, Gennady managed to pocket $20 million, and this is without counting the pay-per-view earnings, which were undoubtedly in the thousands. The great middleweight division champion may not have been popular at his peak, but his earnings at the end of his boxing career more than made up for that gap. Number 6. Errol Spence Jr., $35 million for 2 fights. Spence was never shortchanged when it came to money. In 2019, when the Truth defended his IBF title against Mikey Garcia, his fixed income was already $3 million plus bonuses from pay-per-view sales. Over the years, the situation only improved and there were fewer empty spots in the payments column. For his fight against the welterweight division behemoth Danny Garcia, Errol took home a hefty $8 million, and in 2022, he signed a contract to fight with not the most media-friendly but highly skilled Yordenis Ugas, who retired Manny Pacquiao. In a tough bout where he had to give it all, Spence emerged victorious, but his final earnings were unpleasantly lower than his previous fight, totaling around $5 million. But was there any reason to grieve, considering that just a few months later, the champions team began negotiations with Terence Crawford for the fight of the decade? two undefeated boxers would battle it out for the 4 major organization belts. It was like going back a couple of decades when such matchups were more common. The two fighters had wanted to face each other for a long time, starting from 2018, but for various reasons, the fight couldn't be arranged until the summer of 2023, when two of the best representatives of their generation finally squared off. Unfortunately, the minutes that Errol spent in the ring would be ones he'd want to forget forever, as Crawford absolutely dismantled him as if he were a light snack. Bud masterfully dissected a top contemporary in 8 rounds and delivered a powerful exclamation point in the 9th. Despite the defeat, Spence's earnings were massive, $10 million fixed and a little more on top. As it turns out, there was a lot more on top, approximately $19 million. Of course, $29 million won't help the former champion forget his defeat, but it will certainly dull the sharp pain. Number 5. Terence Crawford, $40 million for 2 fights. Naturally, if Spence made it into the top, then Crawford had to appear here as well. Over the past couple of years of his performances under the Top Rank banner, Terence had been complaining that Bob Arum didn't appreciate him and didn't pay him what the champion truly deserved. The head of the promotional company countered with a weighty argument. Bud didn't sell the broadcast, and therefore paying him exorbitant fees wasn't feasible. By the way, the payouts for some of Crawford's fights were recently revealed, and the money involved is hardly something to complain about. Over $6 million guaranteed for Sean Porter, around $4 million for Kell Brook, and so on. Crawford himself portrayed himself as a global martyr and left Arum's team in a scandal, heading off in search of a better life. 6 months later, the champion finally found his new home, as well as an opponent in the form of Russian David Avanesian, who was relatively unknown to the general public. Crawford claimed an easy victory by knockout and walked away with a cool $10 million. It seems he has finally found a place where he will be appreciated. Soon after, Terence personally arranged his fight with Errol Spence, and this long-awaited bout was also one of the reasons why Bud left Top Rank. Arum and his team simply couldn't make this fight happen, even though Crawford himself was eager to face Spence. As the saying goes, if you want something done right, do it yourself. And Terence did just that. You already know the result of the fight. Crawford tore apart, roasted and devoured Spence like he promised, earning almost $30 million and the status of the undisputed welterweight division champion. Number 4. Oleksandr Usyk, $46 million for 2 fights. If Terence Crawford was merely complaining that he didn't receive enough from Top Rank, then Oleksandr Usyk did indeed spend many years on modest earnings, but it was mostly not his fault. The old cruiserweight always had the reputation of being nobody's favorite. Why watch the smaller heavyweights when there are bigger ones, right? No matter how hard promoters and heads of various companies tried to ignite interest in this weight class, it was all in vain. One more attempt was made in 2017 when they introduced the World Boxing Super Series, where Usyk won and claimed a prize fund of $10 million. Even after that, the Ukrainian didn't acquire an extensive fan base and then realized that it was finally time to move up to heavyweight. After just 2 fights in the new division, Oleksandr obtained a title shot against Anthony Joshua, who held 3 belts and sensationally defeated him on points. Naturally, the lion's share of the fight's purse went to AJ, but Usyk received the recognition and attention he deserved. Soon, a rematch was scheduled, and initially they wanted to hold it in England, but then the higher powers intervened, namely the sheiks from Saudi Arabia, who put a colossal amount of money on the table and invited the guys to box there. It would have been foolish to refuse, and the parties quickly reached an agreement. In the rematch, Anthony performed better, but not enough to take even a single round, so he once again lost by decision, and the gigantic prize money between the 2 fighters was split evenly. Each of the heavyweights took home $40 million. Just recently, Oleksandr stepped into the ring again, this time against the promising knockout artist Daniel Dubois. And in a bout that everyone had already discussed due to a controversial incident, he won by a late round knockout. The champion's purse amounted to about $6 million, which when added up allowed him to surpass Crawford and secure 4th place in the rankings. Number 3. Anthony Joshua, $53 million for 3 fights. Oh AJ, how much money was invested in this guy? From his early steps in professional sports, Joshua was touted as a future superstar, and initially he didn't disappoint. In his career's highlight in 2017, he demolished Klitschko and gathered 3 heavyweight titles. He defended them several times and began to seem invincible. But then came Andy Ruiz, and everything went downhill. The short-statured knockout artist shattered the giant Joshua like a twig, and then Anthony had to go the distance to secure a rematch. After that momentary resurgence, it seemed like the British star's light would shine again. However, OLEKSANDR USYK coming up from the cruiserweights changed everything. In terms of earnings, Joshua's story is quite impressive. Even before his fight with Klitschko, he was already a millionaire, but his wealth multiplied like spring leaves. He received $30 million for the bout with USYK and $40 million for the rematch, after which he entered the list of the richest boxers of all time, currently holding the 10th place. Joshua didn't stop with just 1 fight against USYK, and in 2023 he had 2 more appearances, winning both against Jermaine Franklin and Robert Helenius, who even came out of retirement for the former champion. For these fights, Anthony earned approximately $25 million in fixed purses alone, with pay-per-view percentages not included. However, reporters from the world-renowned Forbes magazine managed to estimate Joshua's approximate earnings, and they reached an astronomical $53 million, allowing him to secure the 28th place in the 2023 rankings, and more importantly, the 3rd spot on this top list. Number 2. Tyson Fury, $58.6 million for 2 fights. Fury is a unique character. Admit it, no one else can generate as much buzz out of nothing quite like the Gypsy King. Each of his video addresses is a work of art that should be carefully studied by future generations. In reality, Tyson is very adept at drawing attention to himself, and this undoubtedly works to his advantage, significantly boosting his earnings. For many years, the British superstar had not received less than $1 million for a fight, and some can't even remember when it was or if it ever happened. Naturally, the most profitable bouts for Fury were his clashes with Deontay Wilder. He earned around $10 million for the first fight and an astronomical $30 million for the second. Let's not even mention the 3rd fight. Oh wait, let's. $35 million, the approximate earnings of the Gypsy King from completing the trilogy in his favor. After such successes, it seemed impossible to replicate. But then came 2022, and Fury signed a contract to fight Dylan White. Seriously, who is this villain compared to the Bronze Bomber? They can't be paying him the same, right? As it turned out, the second name in the contract almost didn't change anything, and Tyson once again took home over $30 million. After that, Fury abruptly announced his retirement and disappeared for 6 months. Apparently, it took the champion half a year to tally his earnings, because after this period, he suddenly announced his return and fought the most unexpected contender, Derek Chisora. Taking his hard-earned $25 million, Fury left for the sunset, leaving all other boxers with one question: why him and not me? In 2023, the champion has yet to have a fight, as he is currently preparing to face Ngannou. But that doesn't stop him from comfortably holding the 2nd position on the list. Number 1. Canelo Alvarez, $110 million for 3 fights. No one in this darn business knows more about money than Saul Alvarez. This guy was groomed to bring in millions, and he excelled at his task. becoming one of the most lucrative boxers since Floyd Mayweather's departure. A flashy style, a memorable appearance, and savvy marketing. These three components were enough for Canelo to become a global superstar, earning more than anyone could dream of in his generation. Alvarez earned his first $1 million purse in a fight against Shane Mosley, and 11 years have passed since then. In the last 8 years, the Mexican's earnings have been measured solely in tens of millions of dollars, and his first records were set in fights against Golovkin, for each of which he took home between $30 and $40 million. Just think about it. At the age of 27, this guy had already earned more than 99% of the world's population could earn in a lifetime. Two legendary fights took place more than 5 years ago, and during this time, Alvarez has fought 10 times, each pocketing a minimum of $20 million. In short, these numbers are mind-boggling and hard to even imagine. So what about 2022 and 2023? During this time, the Mexican managed to fight a whopping 3 times, earning a staggering $110 million, ranking 6th among the top 50 richest athletes of the last stretch. Canelo is the only boxer in the top 25, and one can only applaud his realization of this fact. Even for his loss to Dimitri Bivol, Alvarez received a mind-boggling $30 million, not to mention the victories. The scariest part in terms of colossal figures is that Canelo isn't done yet. Soon he will face Jermell Charlo, and for that fight, the Mexican will once again take home the entire annual budget of Bangladesh, leaving us only to wonder how high this money monster can climb. Bonus mention: Gervonta Davis, $11.5 million for 3 fights. Partial amount PPV bonus unknown. Well, how could we do without the crowd favorite, the dangerous puncher, and just a nice guy, Gervonta Davis? It seems like Mayweather Jr.'s pupil not only learned boxing skills from his mentor, but also how to sell his fights. Otherwise, how can we explain the sums Davis was paid even for not so well-known opponents? In mid-2022, Tank had an easy bout against Rolly Romero and took home $5 million for that. Afterward, he began looking for an opportunity to fight Ryan Garcia. This match had fantastic financial potential, so both sides were interested in it. By the end of the year, the teams managed to agree on the fight in April. But before that, Davis crossed gloves with Hector Garcia from the Dominican Republic, knocking him out and earning another $1.5 million. You could say that this bout was just a warm-up for the Ryan fight. On April the 22nd, Davis delivered one of his best performances in recent years and, as you all surely remember, knocked out Ryan in the 7th round. Davis's official purse amounted to $5 million, but his income from pay-per-view sales is unknown to us. Promoters were confident that the fight would not sell more than 1 million PPVs, but the lightweights exceeded expectations and gathered over 1.2 million pay-per-view buys, each priced at $85 million. Ryan himself admitted that his share of this income exceeded several million, even though he fought on terms that were half as favorable as Tank's. Unfortunately, we can't confirm or deny these claims. We wouldn't want to invent any estimated figures, so all that remains is to guess how much Gervonta Davis really earned. And that's it. Did you enjoy the video? Then be sure to give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Who among the highest earning boxers did we forget or not mention in this top list? Who will top the rankings in 2024? Share your opinions in the comments.